The cowboy bought the most beautiful Apache woman, and the next day she became his wife. The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide, open plains, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and gold. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of wild grass and the distant sound of a river flowing gently. On the edge of the plains, a lone cowboy rode slowly on his horse, a strong and steady brown stallion that seemed to understand every thought he had. His name was James, a man who had spent most of his life traveling from town to town, working hard as a rancher and a cattle driver. Life on the plains was never easy, but it had taught him patience, courage, and the value of simple pleasures. He knew how to work with animals, how to survive in the wilderness, and how to read the weather just by looking at the clouds. James had come to this part of the plains in search of a fresh start. The town nearby was small but lively, full of traders, farmers, and travelers passing through. Life here was simple, but the people were kind, and he liked the sense of community. He often stopped at the general store to buy supplies or chat with the townspeople. They knew him as a hardworking man, always polite and willing to lend a hand. But James was also a man who carried a quiet loneliness with him. He had grown used to solitude after years on the road, and though he enjoyed his freedom, he sometimes wished for someone to share his life with, someone who could understand the vastness of the plains and the silence of long nights. One morning, as he rode closer to the town, he noticed a group of people gathered near the edge of the forest that bordered the fields. They were dressed in colorful clothing, adorned with patterns and designs that told stories of their heritage. Curious, James rode closer to see what was happening. As he approached, he realized that it was a family preparing for a small festival, celebrating a seasonal event with music, dance, and laughter. The sound of drums and flutes filled the air, and the warmth of the fire added a cozy feeling despite the cool morning breeze. Among the crowd, one figure caught James's eye. She was a young woman, her hair long and dark, her eyes shining with intelligence and a quiet strength. She moved gracefully, helping her family set up the area and arranging items for the festival. There was a sense of dignity and confidence in the way she carried herself, a calmness that drew attention without demanding it. James felt a strange mix of admiration and curiosity. He had seen many people in his travels, but there was something about her that felt different, someone who seemed connected to the land and the traditions of her people in a way that was deep and natural. Noticing him watching from a distance, she offered a polite nod, a small gesture of acknowledgement. James returned the nod and continued to watch, trying to understand more about this vibrant and confident woman. He had always respected other cultures and traditions, and he wanted to approach her with respect rather than just curiosity. He remembered the stories he had heard as a child, tales of the people who had lived on these lands long before settlers had arrived. He knew that trust and respect were essential, and he wanted to learn more about her world, not just admire it from afar. Over the next few days, James found reasons to visit the area near the forest and the town more often. He would help with small tasks, carrying supplies or assisting with chores, always making sure his presence was helpful rather than intrusive. The young woman began to notice him as well, observing how he treated the animals, how he listened when people spoke, and how he worked without complaint. There was a quiet connection forming, built on shared effort and mutual respect. They began to exchange friendly words, small stories about their lives, and laughter over little mistakes or surprises that happened during the day. One afternoon, James had the chance to speak with her alone. They were walking along a narrow trail that led through the forest, surrounded by tall trees and the soft sounds of birds and insects. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground. He introduced himself properly, and she shared her name, Yana, which meant eternal bloom. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and the land around them, James listened intently as she described her connection to the earth, the animals, and her people's traditions. He felt a sense of awe and respect, realizing that there was much he could learn from her wisdom and perspective. Iana, in turn, observed James with interest. He was different from the travelers who usually passed through her town. There was honesty in his eyes, kindness in his actions, and a strength that was not about showing power but about caring for what mattered. She found herself sharing stories she usually reserved for family, speaking about her childhood, her hopes, and the small joys of life in her community. James listened without judgment, genuinely intrigued by her world. Their conversations flowed easily, full of questions, answers, and moments of shared silence that felt comfortable rather than awkward. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. They shared meals, helped each other with tasks, and explored the lands together. They laughed at mistakes, celebrated small victories, and slowly discovered the joy of companionship. It was a slow and natural process, built on trust, respect, and genuine curiosity about each other's lives. James realized that what he felt for Ayana was deeper than admiration. It was a desire to protect, support, and be near someone who inspired him to be better. Ayana, in turn, felt a warmth and safety in James's presence, a sense that he would stand by her while respecting her independence and heritage. By the end of the first week, it was clear to both of them that something special was developing. What began as curiosity had grown into friendship, and friendship was slowly turning into something more. They had not rushed, nor had they forced any feelings. Instead, they had allowed their connection to develop naturally, built on the foundation of trust, shared experiences, and mutual respect. The plains, the forest, and the town had become witnesses to the beginning of a relationship that promised adventure, learning, and a deep emotional connection. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the plains, James and Ayana sat together near the riverbank. The sky was painted in shades of purple and gold, and the water reflected the colors like a moving mirror. They talked about the future, their hopes, and the challenges that lay ahead. Both understood that life would not always be easy, but they felt ready to face it together, guided by trust and shared respect. In that moment, neither rushed the next steps. They simply enjoyed the presence of one another, knowing that a strong foundation was being built, one that could support love, friendship, and partnership in the days to come. By the time night fell, with stars twinkling above and the soft sounds of nature surrounding them, James knew that this was the start of a new chapter in his life. Ayana felt the same. It was the beginning of a bond that could grow into a lifelong partnership, not because of obligation or expectation, but because of choice, respect, and mutual admiration. And as they rode back toward the town together, the moonlight guiding their path, both felt a quiet excitement for what the future might bring. A life shared in friendship, adventure, and possibly, in time, love. The next morning, the plains were quiet except for the occasional call of a hawk circling high above. James woke early, as was his habit, feeling the cool breeze brush against his face. The day promised work, but it also held a sense of anticipation. Ever since he had begun spending time with Ayana, he had noticed that his mornings felt brighter, the air seemed fresher, and even the simplest chores carried a new sense of purpose. There was something about knowing that she might be nearby that made him more alert, more attentive, and more aware of the beauty around him. Ayana, meanwhile, was already awake, tending to the small garden behind her family's home. She moved carefully, checking each plant, feeling the soil between her fingers and humming softly to herself. Gardening was something she loved, a way to connect with the earth, to feel the rhythm of life, and to enjoy quiet moments of reflection. When she thought about James, she felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling of comfort and trust. He had proven himself to be honest, kind, and genuinely interested in learning about her life rather than simply admiring her from afar. That trust had grown slowly, like water soaking into dry soil, but now it was strong enough to create a bond neither of them could ignore. By mid-morning, James rode over to the area near Hyana's home, his horse moving steadily across the plains. The sun was higher now, warming the ground and casting long shadows behind the trees. When he arrived, he saw Hyana carefully carrying a basket filled with fresh vegetables and herbs. She noticed him immediately and smiled, waving in a way that was both welcoming and playful. James returned her smile, feeling a flutter in his chest, and dismounted from his horse. He offered to carry the basket, insisting politely, and she allowed him to help. The small act felt significant, a simple gesture of cooperation that strengthened their connection. They walked together toward the town, talking about their plans for the day. James had some supplies to gather for his ranch, and Hyana needed to visit the market to exchange some produce and other items with the local traders. Along the way, they encountered neighbors and friends, many of whom greeted them warmly. The townspeople had begun to notice their growing friendship and offered smiles, nods, and occasional jokes. It was clear to everyone that a unique connection was forming between them, one built not on appearance or status but on genuine respect, shared effort, and mutual curiosity. At the market, Hyana carefully examined the goods, selecting fresh herbs, dried fish, and handmade pottery. James helped her carry the heavier items and engaged in friendly conversation with the traders. He was careful to listen more than he spoke, asking questions about the products and the processes behind them. Hyana watched him with admiration, noticing how he respected everyone he spoke with, regardless of their role or background. It was a quality she valued highly, for she had grown up learning that true character revealed itself in how a person treated others. After finishing their errands, they decided to take a walk along a trail that led through the rolling hills nearby. The path was lined with wildflowers, and the gentle slope provided a clear view of the plain stretching for miles. They walked side by side, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes exchanging stories about their childhoods. James spoke about his life on the road, the long days driving cattle, and the quiet nights spent under the stars. Hyana shared stories about her family, the festivals they celebrated, and the lessons her elders had taught her about nature, respect, and balance. Each story deepened their understanding of each other, creating a bridge between two very different worlds. As they walked, a sudden movement in the grass caught their attention. A small fawn emerged, delicate and cautious, pausing to look at them with wide, curious eyes. James and Hyana froze, not wanting to startle it. The fawn sniffed the air, then slowly continued on its way, disappearing into the trees. Both of them laughed softly, marveling at the quiet beauty of the moment. It was an experience that reminded them of the serenity and wonder that surrounded their lives, even in the simplest and most unexpected ways. Later, they came to a small clearing with a shallow stream running through it. The water was crystal clear, and sunlight sparkled as it danced on the surface. James suggested they rest for a while, and they sat on a large flat rock near the edge of the stream. Hyana took off her shoes and let her feet touch the cool water, giggling as the water rippled around her toes. James followed, careful not to splash too much, and found himself laughing along with her. The simple act of sharing a quiet moment in nature brought them closer, reinforcing the feeling that they could trust and enjoy each other's company. As the day wore on, they spoke about their dreams. James admitted that he had often wished for a life filled with companionship, someone who could understand the rhythm of his days and the silence of his nights. Hyana shared that she had long hoped for someone who respected her independence, but could also offer partnership and friendship. They realized that they were not looking for something forced or rushed, but for a connection that would grow naturally over time. This honesty created a sense of comfort between them, making their friendship stronger and their bond deeper. In the afternoon, they returned to town and helped a group of children gather firewood for a community dinner. James lifted heavy logs with ease, while Ayanna organized the children, giving them small tasks and teaching them how to carry the wood safely. The children looked up to them both, and in that moment, James and Ayanna felt a shared sense of responsibility and care. It was another step in understanding each other's values and learning how they could work together in practical ways. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of pink and lavender, and the town began to settle into quiet activity. Families returned to their homes, merchants closed their stalls, and the cool breeze of the evening swept through the streets. James and Ayanna walked slowly back to her home, their conversation shifting from serious topics to lighter, playful ones. They joked about clumsy mistakes, shared small observations about the day, and even teased each other gently. These moments of laughter and playfulness brought a lightness to their relationship, balancing the seriousness of their growing respect and admiration for each other. When they reached Ayanna's home, her family was already preparing dinner. James offered to help, carrying wood for the fire and assisting with the cooking. He worked quietly, following instructions, and listening carefully to the sounds and smells of the kitchen. Ayanna watched him with a smile, appreciating his willingness to learn and participate without taking over. It was a small act, but it spoke volumes about his character and his respect for her world. After dinner, they sat outside, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. The fire burned gently nearby, casting flickering light across their faces. They spoke softly about the day, about the small joys they had experienced, and about the connection that had begun to form between them. Neither rushed the moment. They simply allowed it to exist, savoring the quiet intimacy of shared understanding. By the end of the day, it was clear that their friendship had grown stronger. They had spent an entire day together, sharing work, play, learning, and conversation. The trust between them had deepened, and both realized that they were becoming an important part of each other's lives. James felt a growing admiration for Ayanna's intelligence, kindness, and strength, while Ayanna found herself appreciating James's honesty, patience, and gentle nature. As they said goodnight, James mounted his horse and watched Ayanna disappear into her home. The moonlight glimmered on the plains, reflecting the promise of a future filled with new experiences, challenges, and shared moments. Both knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would teach them much about life, love, and the strength of partnership built on trust and respect. The days ahead would bring new adventures, opportunities to learn from each other, and challenges to overcome together. But for now, they both felt a quiet happiness, the comfort of knowing that a true friendship was forming, one that might one day grow into something even deeper, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet magic of connection between two souls who had met at exactly the right time. The following morning, the plains were alive with the sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. James woke early, as he always did, and felt a quiet sense of anticipation for the day ahead. He had spent the past few days with Ayanna, and each moment had added something new to his life, a sense of connection, companionship, and curiosity about the world from her perspective. Today, he planned to take her further into the hills, showing her a part of the land he had grown to love, and teaching her some of the skills he had learned over years on the plains. Ayanna, meanwhile, had already started her morning chores. She fed the animals, checked the garden, and prepared breakfast for her family. Her movements were calm and deliberate, each action carried out with care. She often thought about James as she worked. He was not just another traveler passing through. He had a quiet presence that brought comfort, and she felt a growing desire to share more of her life with him. Yet she was careful, knowing that friendships, especially ones that could grow into something more, required patience, understanding, and respect for each other's boundaries. When James arrived, Ayanna greeted him with a bright smile. She had decided to accompany him on a longer ride that day, curious to see more of the plains and the hills beyond. They mounted their horses and rode side by side, the morning sun warming their backs and the wind brushing past their faces. The path they followed wound through gently rolling hills, open meadows, and small clusters of trees. James pointed out landmarks he had discovered over the years: a hidden spring, a rocky outcrop that provided shade, and a narrow path that led to a small but beautiful waterfall. As they rode, James shared stories about his past adventures. He spoke of cattle drives, encounters with other travelers, and the lessons he had learned from surviving in the wilderness. Ayanna listened attentively, asking questions and offering her own insights. She shared stories of her community, the traditions passed down through generations, and the ways her people lived in harmony with nature. Each story deepened their understanding of one another, revealing layers of character, courage, and respect. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, filled with curiosity, laughter, and moments of reflective silence where they simply enjoyed the beauty around them. Eventually, they reached the waterfall, a hidden gem that few in the town knew about. The water tumbled down smooth rocks into a clear, shallow pool surrounded by ferns and wildflowers. James dismounted and helped Ayanna down from her horse. They walked to the edge of the pool, the sound of rushing water filling the air and the cool mist brushing their faces. Ayanna's eyes sparkled as she examined the water, the rocks, and the plants growing nearby. James smiled at her delight, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction in sharing this special place with someone who truly appreciated it. They spent the morning exploring the area. James showed her how to identify edible plants and herbs, how to follow animal tracks, and how to read the signs of weather in the clouds and the wind. Ayanna, in turn, shared her knowledge of local wildlife, the ways animals behaved in different seasons, and the importance of respecting nature while learning from it. Together, they built small piles of stones as markers for the trail, tested the water to see how deep it was, and even spotted a family of deer grazing in a nearby clearing. Their day was filled with learning, laughter, and mutual respect, each moment strengthening the connection that had begun to grow between them. Around noon, they sat near the waterfall to rest and eat the small lunch Ayanna had packed. The sun was warm and the water sparkled under its light. They shared pieces of bread, dried fruit, and cheese, talking about dreams and hopes for the future. James admitted that he often felt lonely during his travels, missing companionship and the simple joys of sharing his life with someone who understood him. Ayanna listened, her eyes gentle, and shared that she too sometimes felt isolated, wishing for someone to journey through life with, someone who respected her independence but could also share in her joys and sorrows. Their conversation took a lighter turn as they joked about minor mishaps from the morning, James slipping on a wet rock and nearly falling into the pool, and Ayanna nearly stepping on a hidden patch of mud that would have left her boots dirty. Their laughter echoed across the clearing, mingling with the sound of the waterfall. It was a moment of pure happiness where they felt free to be themselves without judgment, and it strengthened the bond of trust and friendship that had been growing steadily. After lunch, they explored a small cave near the base of the waterfall. It was cool inside, the walls damp and smooth. Sunlight streamed in through a small opening, creating patterns on the rock floor. James explained how he had once used a similar cave for shelter during a sudden storm, and Ayanna listened intently, imagining the challenges he had faced. They both admired the stalactites and small formations inside the cave, finding beauty in the quiet stillness. James suggested marking the cave as a safe place to visit in the future, and Ayanna agreed, thinking it could be a spot to return to when they wanted peace or inspiration. As the afternoon passed, they decided to ride back toward the town, stopping occasionally to observe birds, examine plants, or watch the changing shadows across the hills. Their horses walked steadily, sensing the calm energy of their riders. Along the way, they met a group of townspeople traveling to a nearby village for supplies. James greeted them warmly, introducing Ayanna and explaining that she had been learning about the land and its history. The townspeople were friendly and welcoming, offering small gifts of dried meat and fresh fruit. Ayanna accepted politely, impressed by James's ability to connect with others and build trust quickly. When they reached the outskirts of the town, they noticed the children from the community playing near the river. James and Ayanna dismounted to watch, smiling at their energy and laughter. The children waved at them, calling out greetings, and both James and Ayanna responded with playful gestures. They stayed for a while, helping the children build small rafts from sticks and reeds. Ayanna guided them carefully, showing how to balance the rafts, while James demonstrated how to float them gently in the water. The children were delighted, and both James and Ayanna felt a deep satisfaction in sharing their knowledge and time with the younger generation. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red, orange, and purple, James and Ayanna walked back to her home. They talked about the day's adventures, reflecting on what they had learned and how much they had enjoyed being together. James admitted that sharing this part of the land with her had been one of the most rewarding experiences of his life. Ayanna, in turn, said that she had never imagined that exploring the hills and learning from each other could be so enjoyable. They realized that the bond between them was growing stronger, shaped by shared experiences, laughter, and moments of quiet reflection. That evening, after dinner with Ayanna's family, James and Ayanna took a walk under the starry sky. The cool night air was filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. They walked slowly, sometimes speaking in low voices, sometimes simply enjoying the silence. James felt a growing sense of admiration and affection for Ayanna. He admired her intelligence, her kindness, and her deep connection to the land. Ayanna, in turn, felt a sense of safety and comfort with James, appreciating his honesty, patience, and gentle nature. They both understood that what was forming between them was more than friendship. It was a bond built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. Before parting for the night, James promised to return the next morning to continue their exploration of the plains. Ayanna smiled, knowing that these adventures were bringing them closer together and creating memories they would both cherish. They said goodnight with a sense of quiet excitement, aware that the days ahead would be filled with new discoveries, lessons, and moments of joy. As James rode away under the light of the moon, he thought about how much his life had changed in such a short time. Meeting Ayanna had brought a new perspective, a sense of purpose, and a feeling of connection that he had never experienced before. Ayanna, watching the moonlight fade from her doorstep, reflected on how fortunate she felt to have someone in her life who treated her with respect, shared her love for nature, and made her feel understood. The following days promised more adventures, learning, and shared experiences. Both James and Ayanna knew that their friendship was growing into something extraordinary, something that could potentially last a lifetime. But they were patient, allowing their bond to develop naturally, guided by trust, respect, and the quiet magic of discovering someone who truly understood them. And as the stars sparkled above, the plains seemed to whisper a gentle promise that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with friendship, trust, adventure, and the possibility of a deep, lasting connection between two people who had met at exactly the right moment in life. The next morning, the plains awoke with the gentle chirping of birds and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden light over the wide, open landscape. James mounted his horse, feeling the familiar rhythm beneath him, and rode toward Ayana's home. Each day spent with her had grown more meaningful, and he felt a quiet excitement to share another day exploring the land and learning from each other. Today, he hoped to introduce her to some of the skills he had developed over the years: how to track animals, find edible plants, and understand the signs of the land that told stories of weather, seasons, and life. Yana was already outside when he arrived, carrying a small basket of freshly picked herbs and fruits from her garden. She smiled warmly when she saw him, and James returned her smile with a nod. Their greeting was simple, yet full of the trust and familiarity that had been growing between them over the past days. They quickly mounted their horses and rode together toward the northern hills, a part of the plains that was less traveled and full of hidden beauty. The trail wound through tall grass, clusters of wildflowers, and small groves of trees. Both felt a sense of freedom as they rode, the wind in their hair and the sun warming their backs. As they traveled, James pointed out tracks in the soil and explained what each might mean. He showed Ayana how to tell the difference between deer tracks and rabbit tracks, how to follow a trail without disturbing the animals, and how to notice subtle signs in the landscape that indicated recent activity. Yana listened carefully, her eyes bright with curiosity, and practiced tracing tracks with her hands and feet. She was quick to learn and ask thoughtful questions, showing a deep understanding of the land and its rhythms. James was impressed by her attentiveness and ability to absorb knowledge, feeling proud to share these skills with someone so eager and capable. They stopped by a small creek that ran through a narrow valley. The water was clear and cool, and the surrounding trees offered a quiet shade. James suggested they take a short break, so they dismounted and led their horses to drink. As the animals drank, James and Ayana sat on a large, flat rock nearby. They shared a simple snack, fresh fruit from her basket and bread from his pack, and talked quietly about their lives. James told her about the long nights he had spent alone under the stars, how he had learned patience, and the small joys he had discovered in solitude. Yana shared stories of her childhood, growing up in a close-knit community, and the lessons her elders had taught her about living in harmony with nature. After their break, they continued exploring, climbing a gentle slope that led to a small plateau overlooking the plains. The view was breathtaking. Rolling fields stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with patches of forest and sparkling streams. They sat together on a large rock at the edge of the plateau, feeling the warmth of the sun and the cool breeze from the open plains. James pointed out landmarks he had discovered over the years, including a hidden cave, a grove of fruit trees, and a distant ridge that he often used to navigate the land. Yana listened intently, fascinated by the depth of knowledge he had gained from years of observation and experience. As they explored further, they came across a family of foxes playing near the edge of the forest. James and Ayana crouched low, careful not to disturb them. They watched in silence as the foxes tumbled and chased each other, marveling at their agility and grace. Ayana whispered in amazement, and James smiled, feeling a shared sense of wonder. It was moments like these that made their adventure special, a reminder that the world was full of beauty if one took the time to notice it. By midday, the sun was high, and they decided to rest under the shade of a large oak tree. Yana pulled out a small notebook and began sketching the plants and animals they had seen, while James taught her how to make small notes in the margins to record tracks and other observations. They spoke about their hopes and dreams, sharing visions of the future and discussing what they wanted to accomplish in their lives. James admitted that he often wished for someone to share the land with, someone who could explore, learn, and grow alongside him. Yana nodded, saying she felt the same, appreciating how he treated her as an equal and respected her ideas and independence. The afternoon was spent learning practical skills. James showed Ayanna how to make simple traps for small animals, not for hunting but to understand their behavior, and how to construct basic shelters using branches and leaves. Ayanna listened carefully and tried her hand at each task, often succeeding on her first attempts. They worked side by side, laughing at small mistakes and celebrating minor victories. These shared activities brought them closer together, strengthening the trust and friendship that had become the foundation of their growing bond. As the day progressed, they moved toward a quiet meadow filled with wildflowers. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blossoms, and the sunlight created patterns on the ground. James and Ayanna walked slowly, talking about the changing seasons and the ways the land provided for those who respected it. Ayanna picked a few flowers, weaving them into a small garland and placing it gently on James's hat as a playful gesture. He laughed, tipping his hat in acknowledgement, and they continued walking, their conversation flowing easily between serious topics and playful banter. In the late afternoon, they discovered a small, shallow pond hidden among trees and reeds. The water reflected the sky like a mirror, and the surrounding area was peaceful and quiet. James suggested they rest again and take a moment to enjoy the stillness. They removed their shoes and dipped their feet into the cool water, laughing as the gentle ripples moved around them. It was a moment of simple joy, a reminder that happiness could be found in the quiet and ordinary experiences of life when shared with someone who truly cared. As the sun began to set, casting golden and pink hues across the sky, James and Ayanna realized it was time to return home. They mounted their horses and rode slowly back, taking in the beauty of the plains and the hills bathed in evening light. Along the way, they shared small stories about their families, their traditions, and the lessons they had learned from the land. Their conversations were easy and natural, full of curiosity, laughter, and understanding. When they arrived at the outskirts of the town, they noticed the children playing near the river, as they often did. James and Ayanna dismounted, spending a few minutes helping the children skip stones and teach them simple lessons about observing nature. The children laughed and cheered, enjoying the attention and guidance of their visitors. James and Ayanna exchanged smiles, feeling satisfaction and joy in these small acts of teaching and connection. That evening, after dinner with Ayanna's family, James and Ayanna walked together under a sky filled with stars. The cool night air carried the scent of wildflowers and grass, and the distant sounds of animals created a peaceful symphony. They spoke softly about the day, reflecting on the adventures, the lessons learned, and the moments of quiet beauty they had shared. Both realized that their friendship was deepening, shaped by shared experiences, trust, and a mutual respect for one another. Before parting for the night, James promised to return the next day for another day of exploration and learning. Ayanna smiled, feeling a sense of excitement and anticipation for the days ahead. She appreciated how James treated her as an equal, how he respected her knowledge and perspective, and how their shared adventures allowed them to grow closer naturally. They said goodnight with a sense of quiet happiness, aware that their bond was becoming something truly special, a connection that could support friendship, trust, and perhaps, in time, something deeper. As James rode away under the soft glow of the moon, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just a few days. Meeting Ayanna had brought a new perspective, a sense of purpose, and a feeling of companionship he had never known before. Ayanna, watching the moonlight fade over the plains, felt equally fortunate to have someone in her life who respected her, shared her love for nature, and made her feel truly understood. The days ahead promised more adventures, more lessons, and more shared experiences. Both knew that their friendship was evolving into something extraordinary, but they were patient, allowing it to grow naturally, guided by trust, respect, and the quiet joy of discovering someone who truly complemented their life. And as the stars sparkled above the wide plains, It felt as if the land itself was watching over them, offering a gentle promise that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with friendship, discovery, and the possibility of a deep, lasting connection. The next morning, the plains were bathed in a soft golden light. Birds called cheerfully from the trees, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of fresh grass and wildflowers. James woke early, as usual, feeling a quiet excitement for the day ahead. Today, he would spend the entire day with Ayanna, exploring a part of the land he had always loved but had rarely shared with anyone. Over the past weeks, their friendship had grown steadily, and both felt a deepening connection. It was a bond built on trust, respect, shared adventure, and quiet companionship, a bond that neither had rushed but that had grown naturally, like a strong tree reaching for the sky. Ayanna was already outside, tending to the small garden behind her home. The morning sunlight highlighted the soft curve of her hair, and her hands moved deftly as she picked fresh herbs and vegetables. She looked up when she saw James approaching on his horse, a smile lighting her face. He waved and she waved back, feeling the warmth of their friendship and the comfort of his presence. Today, they planned to visit the far hills, a region full of hidden streams, rocky outcrops, and peaceful meadows, where few travelers ever ventured. It was a place James had always loved for its quiet beauty and its sense of freedom, and he was eager to share it with someone who would appreciate it as much as he did. They mounted their horses and rode side by side across the plains. The wind swept past them, carrying the scents of wildflowers, grasses, and the faint, earthy smell of the river in the distance. Their conversation flowed easily, moving from light-hearted topics, such as the silly mistakes they had made on previous adventures, to deeper reflections on life, family, and dreams for the future. Both felt the comfort of being with someone who understood them, someone who listened without judgment, and who shared the joy of discovering the world together. As they climbed the first hill, James pointed out tracks in the soil, animal tracks, worn paths, and signs of nature's small dramas. He showed Ayanna how to follow them, how to read the story of the land, and how to notice subtle changes in the plants and soil that hinted at the arrival of different seasons. Ayanna listened carefully, her eyes bright with curiosity, and soon began identifying tracks and signs herself. They paused often, not because the work required it, but because each new observation was a small adventure, a shared moment of learning and discovery. At midday, they reached a wide plateau that overlooked the rolling plains. The view was breathtaking. Streams glimmered like silver ribbons winding through the grass, patches of forest dotted the landscape, and the mountains in the distance rose like silent guardians. James dismounted and helped Ayanna down from her horse. They walked to the edge of the plateau and sat together on a large, flat rock. The sun was warm, and a gentle breeze rustled their hair. Ayanna admired the view, her eyes scanning the horizon as she took in the beauty of the land. James watched her, feeling a quiet admiration for her grace, intelligence, and the way she seemed to connect deeply with the natural world. They spent the afternoon exploring the plateau and nearby valleys. James taught Ayanna how to recognize edible plants, the signs of approaching weather, and how to spot birds and animals from a distance. Ayanna shared her knowledge as well, teaching him the names of flowers, explaining the behaviors of local wildlife, and recounting stories her elders had told her about the land. Their conversations were rich with curiosity, learning, and laughter. Each moment strengthened their bond, revealing how much they could trust and rely on one another. While walking through a small grove, they came across a fallen tree trunk over a shallow stream. Ayanna laughed as James carefully balanced across it, and she followed, stepping lightly as they crossed together. The moment felt symbolic, a simple act that reflected the balance, support, and partnership that had developed between them. James looked at her, noticing the sparkle in her eyes, and realized how much he valued her presence in his life. Iana, too, felt a quiet certainty that she could trust him completely, that together they could navigate any path, even one that was uncertain or difficult. As the day wore on, they reached a secluded meadow filled with wildflowers swaying in the breeze. The air was fragrant and calm, and the gentle hum of insects and birds created a peaceful symphony. They rested there, removing their shoes to feel the cool grass beneath their feet. James told Ayana stories of his childhood and his early travels, moments of hardship, and the small triumphs that had shaped him. Ayana shared her memories of family celebrations, community gatherings, and lessons she had learned about life, patience, and resilience. In the meadow, their worlds felt as though they were merging, two lives connecting naturally and harmoniously. Later, they gathered small sticks and branches to make a simple fire for warmth as the afternoon sun began to lower. They sat together, watching the flames dance, sharing food and talking quietly. Both felt a sense of contentment and peace, realizing that they had found not just friendship but a deep connection that could grow into something more. They laughed at small mistakes, James dropping a piece of bread into the fire by accident, Ayana's playful teasing, and shared quiet moments of reflection, understanding that the trust and comfort between them had become the foundation of a meaningful bond. As evening approached, the sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and purple. The wind had cooled, carrying the scent of the land as day shifted into night. James and Ayana packed up their fire and prepared to return home. They mounted their horses and rode slowly, savoring the last moments of sunlight. Along the way, they reflected on the day, sharing their favorite moments and what they had learned from one another. Both felt a quiet joy in the simple truth that they were becoming an important part of each other's lives. When they reached the edge of the town, the sounds of daily life greeted them, children playing, merchants closing their stalls, and families preparing for the evening. James and Ayana dismounted, spending a few minutes helping the children with small tasks or teaching them about the land. The children laughed and followed their guidance eagerly, and both felt satisfaction in these small acts of sharing knowledge and time. It was another way to strengthen the community, and both realized how much joy could come from helping others while growing closer to one another. That evening, after dinner with Ayana's family, James and Ayana walked together under a sky full of stars. The moonlight shimmered on the plains, casting a gentle glow over the land. They spoke softly, reflecting on the past days, the adventures, lessons, and moments of quiet connection. Both felt a deepening sense of trust, admiration, and respect. It was clear that their relationship had grown beyond friendship into a bond that could last a lifetime. They did not rush, did not force words or actions, but simply let the feeling exist naturally, understanding that the foundation of any lasting relationship was trust, respect, and shared experience. As the night deepened, James and Ayana stood quietly, watching the stars and listening to the sounds of the plains. Finally, James spoke, his voice calm but filled with meaning. He expressed how much he valued their friendship, their shared time, and the lessons they had learned from one another. Ayana, with a gentle smile, echoed his sentiments, adding that she had never felt such a connection before, someone who respected her, shared her love of the land, and allowed her to grow alongside him. In that moment, they understood that what they had was special, a bond rooted in equality, trust, and mutual admiration. Over the next few weeks, their partnership continued to grow. They spent more time exploring the plains, helping the community, and learning from one another. James taught Ayana practical skills for living in the wilderness, while she taught him about the traditions, values, and wisdom of her people. Their friendship matured into a relationship built on shared experiences, laughter, and deep understanding. Both realized that love was not about possession or rushing, but about respect, care, and the joy of being together in life's simple and extraordinary moments. Eventually, the town and community began to recognize their partnership. People saw the respect and admiration they held for each other, the way they worked together, and the way they cared for the land and those around them. There were no grand declarations or forced ceremonies. Their bond was evident in their actions, in the quiet strength of their friendship, and in the way they supported one another. Their relationship was natural, built on days of shared effort, learning, and mutual respect. One evening, as the sun set over the plains, James and Ayanna sat together by the river, reflecting on how far they had come. They had faced small challenges, learned many lessons, and discovered the depth of trust and affection they shared. They spoke of the future, imagining a life filled with adventure, cooperation, and mutual support. Both felt certain that together they could face any challenge, celebrate every joy, and live a life full of meaning and shared purpose. By the end of the day, they had made a silent promise to one another, to continue learning from the land, from each other, and from the experiences that life offered. Their partnership, grounded in trust, friendship, and love, had become a lasting part of their lives. And as the stars twinkled above the plains, the gentle night breeze seemed to carry a quiet blessing, a promise that their bond, formed slowly and naturally, would continue to grow, bringing joy, companionship, and harmony to their lives for many years to come. The days that followed were filled with laughter, adventure, and the deep satisfaction of a life shared with someone who truly understood and respected them. James and Ayanna had discovered the true meaning of partnership, a connection built on trust, care, shared experiences, and mutual admiration. And in that connection, they found not only friendship but the quiet, enduring happiness of two people who had met at exactly the right moment, on the wide, open plains under the endless sky.